Well, there we are. It doesn't look much, but I've added, I've just slightly built up the half the area here and build up that corner a little bit. I'm actually exaggerating rather than reducing the slope, so I was talking a bit backwards there. But it's about deliberately making this difficult for me when I start putting on the foundation blocks, which is the next issue to consider. And I shall glue that together with PVA glue. It will need a bit more carving after it's stuck, so while that's drying I should go and draw some more bricks. So with this mark I finally finish hours and hours and hours of making these bricks. These are actually the big ones at the bottom of the tower, and it's taken an incredible amount of time. And that's the sheet that's going to be at the bottom. These areas I didn't need to do because they're big buildings. This is the large sheet, which is the central area of the tower, and the little bit smaller bit though, it's on the top, and you see the bricks get smaller and smaller and crazier as they go up. It's given me an idea for a story, because I'm going to try and write a story about each part of the tower, and I think the wizard must have sort of taken a family of gnomes and they worked for 7 generations to do these bricks. He must have put them in a time bubble or something, and now I've got to paint them all. And while I'm doing that, I'm thinking about how I'm going to actually make the tower. I can't stick it round the tube, the original tube that I'm using as a former, because it's just going to be too heavy. So I think I'm going to try and make a curved cardboard strip that's going to be stuck on the inside there, and then actually disguising that seam is going to be very tricky. I'm not completely sure how I'm going to do that yet. Attempts to make a cardboard curve, just to get the right circumference measurement, and this is thick, heavy watercolour paper. It's just the remains of some old watercolour painting muckabouts. And I've sliced it up, and I've put a layer of cling film on there first, so it's not going to actually glue itself to the tube, and then I've taped on 2 long strips of that with sellotape, trying to get it on as strap it on as tightly as I possibly can, because if it doesn't stay tight, it's not going to get the right curve. It's going to get a wider and more spread curve than I want, and if it does that, it'll be defeating the object of bringing those sides of the tower around together. I've decided that I'm going to stick this as a second layer on top of the first layer to form the cardboard with Mod Podge, but I think I'm going to have to soak it all with water first so that the paper fibres relax and hopefully reform in the curved shape with the layer of Mod Podge in between, giving it sort of the new curved structure. It may work, it may not. I'm not short on patience usually, but this is driving me mad now, because those bricks I'm having to hand paint, and there's that sheet which isn't a complete sheet, and then there's a whole sheet and a part sheet, and that has taken me hours, even sort of doing an hour a day while I'm listening to podcasts. I'm sorry, I get fed up. So I've ordered a brayer from eBay, which might be a solution. I'll show you that when it comes. And meanwhile, this has come, and this took weeks to come. It was ordered on Amazon, not eBay. It's a little hand foam cutter with a much thinner wire, and it appears to be suitable for young children. Yeah. sure, I'd agree with that. This is it. It didn't cost very much money, as you can probably tell. And the picture, it took 2 9-volt batteries. What actually turns up is very different. It takes 2 size C batteries, which you hardly ever use, and those are 1.5 volt or something. Yeah, so when I was expecting a voltage of 18 volts, which is probably a bit much actually, it's actually going to have a voltage of 3 volts. We're going to have a play. Certainly that wire is much thinner than the hot knife pen. Let me focus on it. It's very thin, so hopefully there'll be less smoke and smeech. Yeah, that seems to cut quite nicely and easily. And I'm going to use that to start cutting the stonework for that lowest layer of footings, medieval equivalent of foundation that the sill beam goes on. And it's going to be a lot easier than working with the big knife or with other tools. I'll do it two-handed, of course, when I'm not holding the camera with one. Maximus approves. That tool is much more successful. I quite enjoyed doing that. It took more than an hour to measure the pieces to the right lengths and cut down from leftover scraps every sort of all the way around, including in the ginnel, and all the pieces are decided I would have to number and letter them to know what's what. And I think I am going to cut them into individual stone blocks, even though that's completely necessary, not completely necessary. I think it would be interesting to do. Before I do that, I'm going to sand the corners, and it's going to be much easier to sand the corners of the strips and then cut them into blocks and sand the ends of the blocks, rather than have to sit and individually sand 100 or more blocks. Tonight I've been sitting here watching videos about photography, because my brain is always on several different things. I'm just chopping up these strips, and I discovered that I don't need to sand the edges because they're soft, and just rubbing them between finger and thumb just blunts off those edges. I can't get the light to show you. Don't need to use sandpaper at all, which is a great relief. And I even managed to drop that strip on the floor and accidentally trod on it when I got up to pick it up. But I'll work with that. That'll be some badly sized stone blocks, or some that crumbled away, and the ones that turned up on the cart were not up to spec, but the builders used them anyway because they wanted to save time, and because the tradition of cowboy builders in England goes back at least 500 years, and I want that irregularity, that sense of accident and bodging and budget dependency of the build. There's my blocks, and they didn't need to be sorted out into the 10 strips, the 10 sides, but once I started doing it, I thought I might as well leave them like that and keep them organised. There's a very slight difference in the average size of each block. See what happens when I stick them down, but I did realise when I was doing it, and this is sort of one of those things that you don't think of to start with, but it comes to you when you're working, is I don't want those to just look like they've been painted with Mod Podge or acrylic paint, because they will look plasticky if I do that, like so many models do. And you remember the tin of paint that I think is going to be chalky enough to paint the walls. That's just been in this cupboard for 2 or 3 months now, because that's how long it's taken me. I'm going to have to experiment with mixing colours into that, whether or not I use inks or dyes or acrylic paint. I'm going to have to do some colour mixing experiments now to try and get a stone colour. I'm going to try and get a sort of pinky red sandstone, like the blocks that are used for Kenilworth Castle, which is in Warwickshire, and some of the footings of buildings around there. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it yet. It's a day or two later. I don't know if I'm coming or going, and other things are always happening. There's a sword spider in production, and I started gluing this row of blocks onto my base along there. And then it got difficult because actually working them out for this front edge, where there's a change in the elevation, and where a brick needs to go, or sorry, a stone block needs to go in front of there. It was just too difficult. So having cut all the bricks into separate parts, I've had to stick them back together just to line them up, and it's next a case of fiddling about how that's going to go. And I've just dropped a bit on the floor, which is my diggery come out of his basket, and I do not want that to get eaten. Because what these buildings didn't have a foundation as such. The stone blocks are the foundation, and there might have been 3 rows, but essentially they clear away the topsoil. They hope they might find a bit of bedrock, which is why towns are built on hills. And then there might be some gaps. Now, where there's those gaps, there might be 3 or 4 rows of stone blocks. I shall put some extra stone blocks in underneath, trying to get. Yeah, this is me standing and holding my camera level, but I have to line it up with that, which is the baseline as it was before the whole thing was magically lifted out of the earth. And meanwhile, Maximus looks on to see that I've got fed up with painting these by hands. I've given up, and I've bought a brayer. That's what that's called. It's smaller than I thought. Took a week or more to come, and it's only actually about 1.5 times the thickness of an ordinary little roller that you use for painting and decorating to roll down the seams of wallpaper. But I'm going to try and use that in a minute and see if that speeds up this task. Now, a brayer is usually used for printing, and it's usually used for applying printing ink to the plates, whatever sort of plates you're using. And there's 2 basic methods of printing. Go back to the invention of printing 400 plus years ago. One is where the ink is pressed into the grooves on the plate, and the second one is where the ink is high above the grooves of the plate. I want to try to achieve the second one, but it's complicated by several factors. Firstly, this is not actually a plate. I'm not going to print from this. Secondly, I'm not using printing ink. I'm just using acrylic paint, which dries faster and is less viscous and less sticky. And I haven't even got a proper sheet of glass or anything, so I'm just improvising this with this, which is the drip tray out of the mini fridge, and working fairly swiftly because I don't want it to dry on my brayer. What I'm going to do is put a blob of the paint on there, try to get even coverage on the brayer, try to get rid of excess using newspaper, and then taking a deep breath. I'm going to try to roll it across and see if I can manage not to get too much into the grooves. And if it doesn't quite work properly, turn the camera off, run for the sink, wash the brayer, because I really don't want it drying on there, and then get a cocktail stick and work that through the grooves. Here we go. So, blob of paint, big hard lump of it falls out, might be too much. Going to get even coverage on that. And then I'm going to try to roll off the excess, so it's a bit wasteful, but I'm hoping it's going to save me time. And then here we go, wish me luck. Not bad. Might take a few layers, but it is doing what I want it to do. Yeah, it's going to take a few coats, but that's okay. Remember, the whole thing, once it's assembled, is going to have several layers of washes on it, which is eventually going to take that. This is called, I don't know what this colour is called, I think it's called elf flesh or something. So it's a pinky colour, but it will look various shades of more natural stony colour. May have to let it dry between. Yeah, definitely gonna, it's doing it really quite evenly and neatly. I'll paint a few bricks by hand just to get a variation. I can see that it's going to take several coats, but it's an awful lot less strain on my eyes and neck and back than painting individually. Well, I'm a bit glum today because I put my appendage of Cthulhu making video up on my YouTube channel, and it's not getting any likes. I spammed it all around the groups. So, a little reminder for you, if you're watching this, give it a like on YouTube. That makes it worthwhile. But this has just cheered me up, because that is the first mock-up rough assembly of my tower, and doing these bricks is driving me bonkers. I'm now doing it with a roller and doing it by hand, and it's fallen to the floor, but it's going to look a bit like that, and it's going okay. Chin up. Now remember the big tube. One piece of it is now this. It's actually weighted with stones and gravel, and it sits by the side of my chair as a 1-cup coffee table. But at the moment, it's a template, and I need to make a series of circles that are slightly the exact diameter of the tube, and some that are a little bit larger, because there are these bits in the original picture of this Irish monastic tower that stick out, and those are going to be structural but also decorative. Now that bit of curved DIY cardboard has been waiting for 3 or 4 weeks, strapped onto its tube and tied on with layered on with the Mod Podge. I wish I'd have drawn a straight line on it before I glued it and stuck it and everything. So I have, as you can see, rather failed to do that. And now I'm going to cut it free and see if it actually holds its curve